first presentation this evening is from Tim Haile, who's the Executive Director of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, who will give us an update on the programs at the Authority and talk about the future at the Authority and its vision. Mr. Haile, the podium is yours.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor Hoffmeister and council members. Really appreciate the opportunity for being here, and staff, Ms. Barone and others. I'm here just to talk about what's happening at CCTA. Just telling you all about the exciting things that are going on. I've actually been on a tour, so I've actually gone to almost all of the 19 cities in Contra Costa County, talking about what we're doing at CCTA and kind of the vision for the future. And that vision for the future is really about how to better connect our communities together. And so there's a number of initiatives that we're taking on right now through Measure J and other grant fund sources to really kind of make a better vision for the future of transportation in Contra Costa County. So if
Let me hold up just a quick second. Sam, do you have a schedule conflict this evening that you need to go first? You're okay? All right. Okay, sorry about that.
No worries. No, I get it. Yeah, absolutely. So before I get into that, just a little bit about what we do for everyone here in the general public. So Contra Costa Transportation Authority, we actually responsible for collecting a 0.5% or 1/2% sales tax here in Contra Costa County for transportation projects and programs. These are actually the number of programs that we actually have funded through Measure J. They fund transit, they fund bicycle and pedestrian projects, school bus programs, programs for accessible transportation for senior and disabled and veterans throughout the entire county. And so this is these are all being funded by Measure J out to 2034 until Measure J actually expires. This is actually the capital projects that are also being funded by Measure J. And so about almost a little less than half of the measure goes into capital. And I'm happy to say that we actually have constructed and built almost 90% of the projects in the voter-approved transportation expenditure plan. And you might notice some recognizable projects here, including the fourth bore, the Caltacot Tunnel, all the Highway 4 expansion out to eastern Contra Costa County, including just recently all the improvements to the 680 Highway 4 interchange, and as well as all the improvements on I-680 and also I-80. So our Measure J program really brings really significant benefits. In fact, we did an analysis of what the county would have looked like with and without Measure J, and the benefits in terms of commuting would, and obviously this is actually pre-pandemic numbers, but you would see almost a 25-minute travel savings in most commutes across the entire county, just based on the benefits that Measure J has brought over the last 10 to 15 years by building some of these significant projects. And so the way we actually do that is we actually leverage these local sales tax dollars and attract state, regional, and federal funds into Contra Costa County. And it's really important to understand that without this local sales tax, without Measure J, we cannot attract these funds into Contra Costa County. And that's really important because right now, with the recent federal infrastructure bill that was signed into law 2 years ago, there's billions of dollars coming down the pipeline for competitive grant funds. And without match funds, like a local sales tax, it's difficult for us to compete at the national level to continue to attract these dollars. And so over the last 10 to 15 years, CCTA has built about $5.6 billion in transportation improvements in Contra Costa County. So in terms of the message that I'm here to talk about is we're kind of at this pivot point in transportation. It's also an exciting time for transportation. And so it's really a time for change. Looking at what we've been doing for the last 25 years and looking towards the future in terms of how can we do things and what do we need to do differently, especially with some of the new problems and challenges that we have in terms of people working from home, travel patterns being less predictable, people are walking and biking more. We have transit is still recovering from the pandemic, and then obviously we have climate change and other issues surrounding transportation. So what we did is we did a travel behavior study, and this is a travel behavior study that we did across the entire county. We went out to about 50,000 people across the entire county, basically got surveys back from them in terms of what are some of the things that you would like to see in Contra Costa County into the future. And so along I-680, they're looking for more carpooling, more private shuttles, more buses, more facilities for walking, and more opportunities for telecommuting. So how can CCTA really kind of move. We've been in the mode of building large transportation projects for the last 25 years. Widening highways is really what we've been in the business of doing. And so how do we address some of these new needs in terms of, more expansion of transit, improving connectivity of different modes across the entire county? And so this is what's kind of guiding us and kind of helping us plan the future of our projects as for transportation. So one of this program is called Vision Zero. As people are walking and biking more, over about 20% of fatalities in Contra Costa County are due to walking and biking. And so we want to address that. And so CCTA, the authority board, adopted a Vision Zero implementation guide back in September of 2021. And this is really a tool for all of us. This is a tool for local jurisdictions to be able to implement and adopt Vision Zero, and however you want to call that. It could be safer streets for all, however you want to deem that. But we use the Vision Zero approach, and that's a national recognized term that really shows how to implement safe systems approach and to develop quick build projects like the one you see on the right. And when I mean quick build, I'm talking about projects you can get environmentally approved very quickly, they're exempt, and you can get in there and actually provide safety and benefit right away. And that's really through like this, for example, like this refuge area on the right-hand side. Dedicated crosswalks for bicycles as well as for pedestrians, making sure you've got proper crossings for ADA accessible users, wheelchair accessible users. And that's a lot different than how it looks on the left, in terms of everyone just being mixed together, making sure that those conflicts between our most vulnerable road users and vehicles are addressed in terms of how we're designing our infrastructure. The other thing we're looking at is how we can move into more of a transit-first type of culture. So we've been building highways and freeways for a long time now, and we're at a point where we're not going to be able to build ourselves out of congestion. And so what can we do in terms of reprioritizing our roadways to better serve and connect people across our communities? And in one way is doing that with transit, and it's kind of like the graphic there on the left, and kind of looking at how we can reprioritize our roadways for more walking, biking, and transit. We're doing this through the development of an integrated transit plan. We're selecting a consultant now, and we're going to be working with the 19 cities as well as our transit operators to look at how we can really design the future of transit in Contra Costa County, really understand the core transit system and how to best serve that with first and last mile, and really help support transit recovery across the entire county. But also doing it in a way of how do we move to zero emissions? How do we address equity in our communities, making sure people have access to transit across our entire county, and really overcoming a lot of the institutional barriers that we've created over the last decade or 2 decades in terms of how we've created our transit system here in Contra Costa County. Another initiative that we're doing, and this is something that we were just, I thought about in terms of, sitting at a red light. How many people hate sitting at a red light and there's no one at the intersection, right? Me, right? And so we kind of came up with this countywide connected signal system project, really helping and working with all the 19 cities across the entire county and helping to really bring in the latest technology, upgrade traffic controllers, bring everyone up to the latest standards, but really doing that in a way that will help prepare us for the future. One, be able to improve traffic flow using our signals, so being able to do a better job of changing the signal phase and timing and being more proactive in terms of managing congestion rather than just doing old timing schedules, et cetera. So leveraging innovation and software to do that, but also prepare for transit priority or prioritization for emergency vehicles, but also how can we prepare intersections for more of the innovative things that are coming down the pipeline, such as connected and autonomous vehicles. Another thing we have is called Charge Up Contra Costa. This is actually preparing the entire county to moving into electrification and zero emissions. We actually obtained a grant from the California Energy Commission to implement and install electric vehicle chargers across the county. And so that's phase 1 of the plan, and we're continuing to look and seek funding, especially through the new infrastructure bill. There's there's over $4 billion that's going to be dedicated to zero emission infrastructure. And so that's being dedicated or distributed by formula to the state of California, and then most likely distributed through some sort of competitive process. And so we're closely watching this to see how we can, position Contra Costa County to help bring in electric vehicle charging and also do it in an equitable way. Most electric vehicle charging right now gets done at people's homes, and that doesn't help people that live in multifamily homes or have to go to shopping centers, et cetera. So if you live in a multifamily home, you probably don't have access to electric vehicle charging. And so that's what this project, Charge Up Contra Costa, really is looking at, particularly right now in the city of Richmond and Pittsburgh and Concord, and really also looking at the workforce development opportunities associated with that. We've partnered with Future Build, Richmond Build, to help train workforce of the future for electric vehicle installation training programs. And that way we're bringing up that workforce in Contra Costa County and kind of preparing for them for these these new technologies. The other thing is very a priority for CCTA is accessible transportation. So last December, the Authority Board approved a framework to implement a brand new department within Contra Costa Transportation Authority called the Office of Accessibility and Equity. And so the Office of the OAE that we call it, we would establish a new advisory committee under the Authority Board, have a work plan and a budget, and then we would also establish a brand new nonprofit under Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And what that nonprofit will do is actually coordinate over 24 accessible transportation services across the entire county. So and the way I describe this is that you've got curb-to-curb service, which is what our transit providers provide, and then we have door-to-door service, people that need, that extra support to get to medical appointments, to get to a dialysis appointment. And this accessible transportation initiative is to really break down the barriers, because we've created silos. For example, if you wanted to go, say, from Martinez to Richmond, or go from Antioch to the Martinez County Hospital, it would have taken you 4 to 5 hours, because there would be a number of transfers to be able to do that. And so we don't want people sitting there waiting in a wheelchair or waiting for these services, in waiting for transfers and connections. And so the transit providers actually created a one-seat ride. And so now you can have this one-seat ride system where you just call up one provider, it comes, picks you up in Antioch, and it takes you directly to the Martinez Hospital. And so this coordinating entity that we will create will establish a one-call, one-click center. It'll manage a database of all the accessible needs in Contra Costa County, and also determine all the services that exist today, understand gaps, and also expand services and create new services to help fulfill the needs that are part of that, the user database that they would be managing. We're also updating our countywide transportation plan. This is an exciting year. We have a tremendous amount of outreach that's going to be happening this year. We're actually making a commitment to come to every single city at one of your community events to talk about what we're doing at CCTA. And this is really a plan that we look at in terms of building out the future and the next version of projects and programs that we'll be funding in any types of future fund sources. This is the future of what we think is a highway along the 680 corridor. This is actually based on our Innovate 680 program. As we're starting to kind of look towards the future, how do you manage the 680 corridor with basically not widening, no capacity? And so this is really led by basically 6 projects that are ongoing and being delivered concurrently in the corridor, including completing the express lanes, share mobility hubs, connected autonomous vehicles, coordinated adaptive ramp metering, smart signals, mobility as a service, so the ability to put in an origin and destination to be able to have access to multimodal trip solutions, and then also better transit in the corridor through bus on shoulder, as well as a brand new express bus service in the corridor. So the City of Concord has been participating in our technical advisory committee and our policy advisory committee, and I just wanted to update the council on kind of what we're doing there. But basically, what does all this mean to the user? Basically, you book a ride through an app. You basically go to a share mobility hub where you have access to personalized mobility options, and then you basically get prioritized. So this is a bus being prioritized to get on the I-680 freeway. It then, goes down and it takes you to BART, takes you to your destination, and then you basically receive rewards for your trip. I'm not going to go through this diagram, but this is extremely complicated to do. There's multiple systems involved to be able to do this, especially as we look at the existing regional systems, local systems, and the new gaps they're going to need to take to do that. And so these are all the policies that we've been discussing with our Policy Advisory Committee, which Carlin Obringer actually participates on. And we go through all of these topics in detail to understand how we're building the corridor for the future. And these are particularly the 4 major policies that we've been talking about in terms of, how do we actually delegate and automate control of the transportation system? Do we need a countywide operations center? How do we collect data that can be useful for the entire county and all 19 cities? And then how do we develop a decision support system to be able to make those decisions in real time, to be able to operate our system more efficiently and more effectively? And so, also just want to share Redefine Mobility. So Gomentum Station continues to receive national recognition. Secretary Pete Buttigieg actually came to Gomentum Station back in September. Glideways continues to develop. They're going to be ready for deployment in 2025. On the bottom right-hand corner, that's a Navia shared autonomous vehicle that we're going to be deploying for public service for the first time in the California, starting in the next couple of months in Bishop Branch. That technology is ready for deployment minus funding. Once we have funding, we can actually start deploying these level 4 shared autonomous vehicles throughout the entire county. And then also we made a commitment, like I said, in terms of CCTA public awareness and sharing what the future of transportation is going to look like. So we actually took a shared autonomous vehicle to an event in Pleasant Hill. And this is what I was talking about in terms of really bringing a shuttle and bringing CCTA to your community event and sharing, what the transportation of the future is going to look like, be able to touch and feel it. The real exciting thing about this was watching parents introduce their kids to the new technology. Like, this is what you're going to be riding in the future. And it was really cool and really exciting to kind of witness. That concludes my presentation. I know that's a lot, but there's a lot going on right now in transportation and CCTA. But just want to kind of give you a broad overview of kind of what we're doing at CCTA, and welcome to answer any questions you might have.
Okay. Let me just go to council, see if there's questions. Councilmember Obringer.
Thank you. So thank you so much for your presentation. And I just had a few follow-up questions. You mentioned equity priority communities. So could you talk more about, what that looks like from a transportation lens and specific to Concord? I mean, I heard you mention looking for charge-up Contra Costa sites in Concord, and I thought I remembered in one of our meetings looking at something like 1500 Monument, for example, as a place to site. So could you share more information about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, equity is becoming fundamental in everything that we're doing now at CCTA. I mean, that's one of the reasons why that we're establishing an Office of Accessibility and Equity to kind of continue to really kind of ingrain that in everything that we do, including the countywide transportation plan, including what we're doing with our website, making sure that everything is accessible, our public meetings, et cetera. And so the equity priority communities are basically, those are federally designated. I mean, as well as MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, actually designates them as called communities of concern. But equity priority communities are basically, low income or diverse communities. I mean, portions of Concord is an equity priority community. And so basically what that means is we're able to, look at how those areas can actually be eligible for funding in the future, right? And so, like, for example, the Vision Zero, we just got, I didn't mention this, but we actually just secured over $100 million for safe streets and for and roads in Contra Costa County. In fact, 2 of those projects are actually for Concord. One is the Galindo Street multimodal corridor, and then the other one is the Willow Pass Road bikeway connection. So those 2 of those projects were actually funded through OBAG 3, which is a federal formula program that was distributed this year through MTC. And so CCTA did a call for projects, and through that call for projects, we actually prioritized equity priority communities because, I mean, that's the direction that we want to go in terms of how we're building our projects. And then what was your second question?
So my second question, I was just really interested in the sites that you were considering for the Charge Up Contra Costa in Concord.
Yeah, so that's being funded through a grant that we got from the California Energy Commission. And so what we're doing is it's kind of like a public-private partnership, but that grant specifically targets electric vehicle installations in equity priority communities. So both in Concord, Richmond, and Pittsburgh. There's also e-bike rebate programs as well that are available. And then I also mentioned the workforce development elements of that grant. And so the way that the siting actually happens as part of that grant is basically it's really up to the private sector. So for example, like a company like ChargePoint will work with a shopping center or work with a business to be able to put in the charging equipment. And then what they do is they essentially seek a rebate from CCTA through the grant program. So we're actually not building the actual chargers. We're actually leaving that up to the private sector, and then we essentially give them rebates in terms of installing the chargers, full rebates.
So are there any sites that are in development that you can share with us?
I can get back to you. I know there are some being built in Concord. I don't know specifically where, but I know they are being built in Concord.
Okay, yes, I would like to know that, please. And then going back, so you talked about a workforce development component around the Charge Up Contra Costa, and I think you mentioned Richmond Build and someone else. What does that look like? What kind of, are they learning how to install and maintain the charging stations, or what is that program?
All of the above, actually. So actually what's interesting is a lot of the new federal funding that's coming down the pipeline actually requires that installations are being done with EVITP certified staff, electric vehicle installation training program staff. And so it just so happens that we have Future Build and Richmond Build. Future Build is in Pittsburgh, Richmond Build's in Richmond. And both of those organizations basically are supporting people that either don't have jobs or are looking for jobs, and basically training in that workforce to the exact point we were saying in terms of installing the actual electric charging equipment, but also maintaining the electric charging equipment. So that's primarily what they're doing, is in both installation and maintenance of the charging equipment through that workforce development program.
Thank you. And just, I think, 2 more questions. So going back to the equity piece, could you share with us, so in a city like Concord, how does that work? Because you're a transportation organization, right, which is pretty bureaucratic. So what kinds of partners are you working with? Are you working with nonprofit organizations like, say, Monument Impact, for example, that are engaged with the community to find out, what the transportation needs are? How does that work? How are you connecting with community to find out what the needs are?
So that right there is exactly why we're establishing this new Office of Accessibility and Equity. So our next step with that is to do essentially a countywide equity action plan, basically, and to be able to answer the exact questions that you're answering, Councilmember Oberbringer. I think that we don't have all those answers yet.
Okay.
We don't have all those answers yet, and I think you mentioned like Monument Impact, and I think you're absolutely right, is essentially, creating a bench of community-based organizations that can help us understand, where those concerns are, where are the pockets, and be able to understand how we can address that. And so we're actually putting in an application for a Caltrans Sustainable Communities Grant to be able to provide funding for this, like I said, an equity action plan countywide. And then that'll then feed into the development of our countywide transportation plan over the next 2 years. And we'll have a better understanding of what that looks like in Contra Costa County. Because quite frankly, in Contra Costa County, equity does mean different things to different people as you go across the entire county. And so we want to make sure that we're crafting the right programs across the entire county.
And I think it would also make sense, I know that the county is forming their Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, and so it might make sense to do some coordination there.
Yep.
So my last question, you touched on it briefly, but it would just be helpful to learn a little bit more about what's happening with Gomentum. How many partners, is there, additional interest, what's happening? Because unfortunately, I feel like sometimes Gomentum Station is like a best kept secret, and we really would like to make sure people know about what's happening out there.
Yeah, so Gomentum Station, for everyone that's listening in the audience, it's a secured autonomous vehicle test bed that we established in 2014 in partnership with the city of Concord, the U.S. Navy, as well as the county. And so today, as of today, we have over 24 active testing partners that are testing autonomous vehicles out there. we've actually have taken the former Concord Naval Weapons Station and split it up into 10 testing zones. And those 10 testing zones essentially, get released to our partners on the 20th every month, and in about 5 minutes, they're all booked. What's really exciting is that we basically have, like, believe it or not, because of the restrictions that we're working within on the base, relative to the Navy, we essentially have run out of space at the Naval Weapons Station. In fact, in October, November, and December, we actually had over 62 reservation requests for only 25 days of testing. So we actually had to turn down partners in terms of testing. And so we have reached critical mass at Momentum Station. In terms of opportunities, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration is actually getting ready to release a demonstration project to basically pick a site to establish an autonomous vehicle regulatory framework nationally. And so we are working to position Momentum Station on that front. But we will have, continued challenges based on our current restrictions out at the base. But we continue to do what we have and leverage what we have to really, expand and grow the program, both, like I said, locally, regionally, nationally, as well as internationally. And so, and in terms of like future uses, I mean, we were coordinating with Concord first in terms of what Momentum Station could look like in a future development. And now we'll have to really wait and see what the council really wants to do in terms of next steps. And we're waiting, we'll be looking forward to that decision later this month, or actually in February or March.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Vice Mayor Bassan.
I'd like to follow up on the questions around Momentum. And I'm very glad that you have a high-demand operation there. How much money does you guys get from all this?
So the revenues generated, it ranges because it's really based on test days. We can't test on rain days. Like, for example, we haven't been testing.
Just dollars.
But average anywhere from $2 to $3 million in revenue.
Okay, how much of that is shared with the city of Concord?
We usually pay for all the security at the base, and then we usually take those funds and actually reinvest it back into the site.
So it is correct that you guys are getting money and we're not getting any?
Well, CCTA is not getting any money either.
Well, you're reinvesting it.
Yeah.
Okay. When you go talk to your people about equity, bring this up because this is inequitable. Thank you.
Any other questions from council members? Councilmember Nakamura?
Great, thank you. Thanks for your presentation. One of the things that I'm really excited about is the Vision Zero that you were sharing, and I have sat in on a couple of the working group meetings for CCTA and the working group. You mentioned the Willow Pass as being one of the projects in Concord. Can you expand on that as to how far that is, and does that include Kinney Bridge, which bicyclists in the area call Suicide Bridge?
Actually, I hate to say it, but I don't know the scope of that project.
Okay.
That's probably because what we did is we took, it might be better for the staff here at Concord to maybe answer that question, because we essentially built the funding around a call for projects for the entire county, and so that was just one of the projects that competed really well for funding. So I don't know if anyone at the city may have more information about that project.
Our community development director could probably briefly describe the OBEG grant project for Willow Pass.
So Kevin Marshall, Director of Community Development. The project is a cycle track that was proposed several years ago and supported by council that would be implemented into our Willow Pass paving project, which is scheduled for later this year or into spring of next year. We would construct from Landana down to Parkside a dedicated cycle track, which would give protected bike lanes, pedestrian access along there for.
It does not include the base area.
It does not extend into the base at this time, no. Yeah, up to Lantana.
And maybe if you could just share, because I know this thing has been going on, trying to cobble together funding since at least 2016. So, it's been a long time coming, correct? To get the funding and partnering with CCTA and MTC and everybody else.
Correct. So this was the final piece. We had gotten design done previously, and we got some elements of the preparing it to have a dedicated bike lane through the paving project. With this OBAG 3 funding, we now have full funding for construction to construct the cycle track as part of the paving project, as opposed to having to come in later and insert it into where we had prepared for that area. Yes.
And as I understand, it's in areas that we already have right-of-way, so we don't have right-of-way acquisition to
Correct. There is
address.
no right-of-way acquisition for the cycle track project, correct?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, if you have other
And
questions.
I had
go
one
ahead.
other question on the slide. I think it's slide 3. It mentions bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and it says Treat Boulevard and San Pablo Dam Road. When's the Treat Boulevard happening, or has that happened?
So the Treat Boulevard project, I do know a little bit about that one. That project is being led by the County Public Works Department, and so that project is actually a multimodal kind of reprioritization of Treat. And they're actually providing better dedicated bicycle lanes all the way from Pleasant Hill Road, all the way down to, through the freeway, through I-680, all the way down to Oak Boulevard? Oak Park Boulevard. Oak Grove? Yeah, Oak Park Road, thank you. Yeah, Oak Park Road.
There's an Oak Grove, and there's an
Oak Park Road, not Oak Grove. Not Oak Grove, Oak Park Road. It's the frontage roads just right after the freeway as you're traveling across, traveling down. Yeah, it's like right where like the Pleasant Hill BART station is, like that's Oak Park Road.
So this is a very short segment of
Yes,
Treat.
that's-
It's more Walnut Creek than.
It's more unincorporated county
Unincorporated.
portion of Treat Boulevard.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Very much.
If you can just touch on, because I was interested in your charging
Yeah.
program. Are you looking at fast chargers versus trickle chargers, or have the conversations gone to that point?
Yeah, so actually, there's a combination of type 1, type 2, and fast charging as part of the grant. It's up to the private sector and kind of what type of charging facility they want to choose for that particular development or home, et cetera. So but we have been installing type 1, type 2, and fast chargers.
Okay, 'cause, well, just pass along to them, fast chargers.
Yeah, where do
is
you
what
want
I've been
one?
hearing about. And people have, in some complexes, they may have a charging station, but it's a type 1 or type 2, and they don't use it. They go down to the shopping center to use
Yeah,
the
use the
fast
fast,
charger.
yeah.
And then they're complaining about there's not enough fast chargers. And also, when you look at those, there's, with the shopping centers, there's apparently a lack of maintenance on those things, that somehow that's fallen through the cracks in terms of how to keep them up and going, and whether that's a supply chain issue. But all the public knows is, only 2 of the 8 chargers are working, and it's been that way for, months. And
Yeah.
so they're frustrated about, oh, great, it's exciting, and then all of a sudden, it's not there because it doesn't have the O&M to keep them up. What's the situation like with fast? Who are you guys using for the fast charger, or for the charging? You said private company.
Yeah, so it's private companies like ChargePoint.
Okay, like
Yeah,
ChargePoint,
like
which I'm
ChargePoint.
familiar with.
Yeah, like,
Have you had information back? Because I know a lot of the challenges are that they can go in and put in the charging station, but the PG&E is not there to support the unit, and the cost or the timeline for that to get a transformer upgrade or to get the power supply there is, you two can wait 2 years or 3 years. You're on the long list of to-dos for PG&E. What abilities do you have to help move that, or do we need to work with CCTA through the League of Cities on, focusing on legislation that can maybe push PG&E to prioritize those types of installs?
so I would say,
On their side, because it doesn't
Yeah.
do any good to say, hey, we've
Yeah.
got a group ready to put in a charger, and by the way, it takes a year to get, the electrical cord from PG&E to plug in from the street to the charger.
yeah, so I mean, that is one of the primary things that you look at in terms of siting. So a lot of the siting that's happening is basically where there is available, electrical infrastructure, right? And so, but just so you know, we have been involved with PG&E. I actually have a quarterly meeting with the executive leadership of PG&E on a quarterly basis to talk about all of our projects. And so we have talked about some of the siting locations that have been brought to my level as part of the California Energy Commission grant. But I think, yeah, on all fronts, we should all be working together to be pushing PG&E to get our grid ready for electrification.
Great. Any other questions from council? Councilmember Olbringer?
Thank you. One question I forgot to ask. I heard you mention something about funding for more EV chargers, which we can always use. And we are definitely lacking in fast chargers. I can't think of one that's in Concord, and I'm an electrical vehicle driver, at least not that I'm aware of. Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell my husband because he does.
I think
charging.
Veranda, right? Doesn't Veranda have, well, they have the Tesla.
For Tesla, yes, which I'm driving a poor man's
Yeah.
electric vehicle.
But they're not all working at Lucky's.
But anyway, my question is there an application or a grant process to get funding for more EV chargers?
Yeah, so there's actually two programs in the Investment in Infrastructure Jobs Act, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill from the Biden administration that was passed in 21. There's two programs. There's the Carbon Reduction Program, which is about $2.5 billion. There's also what's called the National Electric Vehicle Installation Program called NEVI. That program is also about $2 billion. So about, like I mentioned, it's over $4 billion for electric vehicle charging. The NEVI program is actually being distributed to Caltrans, so to the state, and to the California Energy Commission. So the California Energy Commission will actually dictate how those funds are being distributed. Both those programs are based on, you have to be an alternative fuel corridor to be eligible for those funds. Both 680, 80, we actually just submitted an application for Highway 4 to make it eligible as an alternative fuel corridor because it was not eligible up until recently. And so both three corridors are alternative fuel corridors designated by the Federal Highways Administration. So we are eligible for those funds. And then they're basically looking at distributing it from a formula standpoint, and they have selected which corridor by timeline. So they essentially look at all the existing infrastructure that exists today. So like 680 has electric vehicle charging on it already. So it actually got bumped down in the corridor. So a lot of electric vehicle charging is actually happening more in the rural areas. So like I-5, 99, where there's not electric vehicles. So those are more of the priority corridors that are happening right now. And this funding is really intended to help electrify the highways, essentially. And so being able to, get into an electric vehicle and be able to travel across the state with electric vehicle, right? So that's what this funding is really intended to be. That's the NEVI program. The Carbon Reduction Program is a competitive program. We're tracking that program, and we are positioning to apply for that program. And we will be doing we're actually partnering with AAA, the Automobile Association. They actually have an electric vehicle program. And so we're working with them, working with CCTA to do more of a county-wide application through the Carbon Reduction Program.
So we have to stay tuned to
Yeah,
the
stay
cities
tuned.
to apply.
Yeah, the Carbon Reduction Program, and we're still waiting for them to write the program guidelines, actually.
Got it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Vice Mayor Brisson.
Yeah, I'm going to try to stumble through this thought, and please bear with me if it's not crystal clear. One of the things I've been concerned with is a systemic problem when you talk about equity and that you want to make sure that in the low-income areas that we put in the EVs. But at the same time, you talk about how it has to be a private-public partnership. Well, in a low-income area, the concept right now, I would imagine, is that would be the least profitable for the partnership because of the fact that the average EV car is is not exactly penetrated into the low-income areas because the cost of the cars haven't really gotten down to really poor people. So I don't know how, I just wanted to bring that up because I don't know how to solve that initially, but what is, obviously you're going to have a plan where, and I agree, we need to put EV stations in poor areas, low-income areas, because eventually something will happen. But in that interim, until the EV car becomes like the Volkswagen Beetle of the future, how are you going to deal with the real-world economics of that area where where you put EV stations not being as profitable as some of the others for the partners? How do you, I mean, is there a plan for that, or am I just so far off base?
So I'll address that in two different ways. I think the latter part of what you're saying in terms of addressing the business model electric vehicle charging is still something that needs to be determined. I don't have a good answer for you for that.
At least it makes sense.
Yeah, there's a business model aspect to this that still needs to be figured out. But I will say in terms of how we're, controlling the fact that the private sector is doing what they're supposed to be doing, that's why we require them to install first, and then we do a reimbursement program. So that way, in order to be eligible for reimbursement for the installation, they have to check basically a number of boxes, essentially.
How are you going to force the private partner to put the EV stations in the poor area right now? Because anyone who's sitting on the accounting side, the bean counters, whatever you want to call them, they're obviously going to be saying, hey, if we put 2 there, I can put 1 over here and make twice as much as that. How are you intending to force the building in the poor areas, or is that kind of coercion not part of your game plan? I don't know how you're going to deal with that.
Yeah, so basically the incentive, the carrot, if you will, is really built into the funding program. So like a lot of this funding that's coming down from the state, coming down from the federal, it's required. They cannot seek any type of reimbursement or be even eligible for these funds unless they install it within an equity priority community.
And let me just add, one of the things I know from ChargePoint is it's not just who owns a vehicle within a geographic area. They also look at pass-through traffic. And if you have electric vehicles that may be utilizing that connectivity point, the street or whatever, to get to a freeway, which is why probably 1500 Monument scored well, because you've got, a Costco down the street and a freeway access point in another location that it serves not just those who own that may live in a geographic area, but they're also looking at the patterns of travel of the electric vehicles as well. Am I mistaken on that? Because I kind of heard that from ChargePoint.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions from council? Councilmember Nakamura.
Yeah, one of my questions, and this might be for Councilmember Burson, is doesn't MCE have a rebate program for low income to help them get into electric vehicles?
They have a program, but the trickle down to our level is the issue, all right? And we need to be able to present to them a proposal saying, this is where we want them, this is how many we want, this is who's going to fund it, this is who's going to run it, and what are you going to do to pony up your money? So again, on Friday when we have our executive meeting, this is something, I brought it up last month, and we can continue the discussion at the executive committee. We're on the executive committee of MCE.
Fantastic, yeah.
Let me just ask, Tim, does the Transportation Authority do along the lines of the charging and the electrifying, so to speak, any coordination with MCE in terms of opportunities there that they may have access to? Does your staff talk to their staff?
MCE is actually part of the California Energy Commission grant.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're actually helping us, and wherever they're having services, they're part of the grant as well. Yeah.
Good. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, no other questions from council members? Thank you, Tim. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for
Thank you
general
very
public
much,
comment.
and sorry for taking so much time, but great questions. I love transportation. I can do this all night, so thank you very much.
Thank you.